to today's OASIS lunchtime talk. Today we have what I think will be very interesting to many of you, a talk about environmental awareness and climate change in the context of video games. To make it even more interesting is that the discussed examples rise from the Asian game industry and culture, a topical area which I think is perhaps a bit less known to many of us here. Our speaker today is Professor of South Asian Studies, Xenia Zeiler, from the University of Helsinki. Professor Zeiler's research is located at the intersection of digital media, culture and society, with a special focus on India, global Indian communities, video games and gaming research in India and elsewhere. And we have tried to arrange this talk for a long time, and we are very happy to finally have Professor Zeiler here. So without further delay, the floor is yours, Xenia.
Thank you so much. Likewise, I'm very happy to be here. Indeed, we have been trying and there have been scheduling conflicts for years, I believe. So I'm really happy to be back in Tampere. I see a few familiar faces and some faces whom I have never talked to, but whom I know from the other OASIS talks, which I've been watching. You said it. I'm Xenia, situated in South Asian Studies. So that would be my first disclaimer of sorts. I'm not a typical game studies person, but I have been working on and around and about games for a decade now, very often with colleagues. It started out in Germany. I will mention that briefly as we go along. So my area of expertise and my main interest indeed is about India when it comes to games and also otherwise. Apart from games and gaming research, I do studies on especially pop culture, including things like Bollywood. And of course, these things also sometimes relate to the games and gaming research. Environmental awareness and climate change in relation to video games. For me, that is one of the new topics. I've been working on that for barely half a year. So that's my first venture, so to say, into this important topic. Other people have done amazing work about this. I'm sure you are aware. If you're here, it seems you're interested in this specific theme as well. There have been amazing studies coming out rather recently on, of course, the sustainability aspects of the material culture of games, not only of game production, but also much more broadly about the energy consumption levels involved and so on. This talk is not about that. This talk indeed focuses specifically on two examples from Asia. One game from India and one game from Korea, to give you examples basically about how some new Asia-produced games take, I think, a rather distinct and certainly interesting approach to facilitate and support environment appreciation and awareness, I call that. We are going to see it's not about top-down teaching. These are not educational games in a way, but then in the other way they are, and I'm coming to that as well. This is what is going to happen today. Now, to demonstrate all that, for me to better understand, to better research, for you as listeners to better describe how video games and their environments support this negotiation, this empathizing over climate change and environmental awareness. I will also of me and I call gamevironments. In our case, today this means, yes, I'll show you the games, but also I'll have interview and statement examples from the game developers. I'll show you review examples from players, but also trying to reach beyond the player level. I'll show a few comments on gameplay videos from audiences that, of course, we don't know if we don't do interviews. They might or might not play games themselves in general, and these games in particular. It's also important to say that these games, while produced in Asia, in India, respectively Korea, are actually aimed at global audiences. So the intention is to reach beyond the regional or national borders where they are produced. These are my main questions that you see here. How are these nature environment related themes are taken up to begin with, but also who are the target audiences more specifically, and yes, how are these games perceived by audiences? Not so much, interestingly, in the countries themselves, as we are going to see in the examples, but more beyond them, globally. I have two theoretical and methodical departure points, which I would like to lay open before we start. The first one is educational video games. That is, of course, a field or a subfield of study that has been thriving for more than a decade now, but also it's very contested. Partly because of the fact that it's difficult to actually measure the output, the success, so to say, of educational video games. Of course, you can do questionnaires, you can do interviews, you can even go with some more sophisticated technology to measure heartbeats and try to get grip of the immersion factor and so on. All that is not really, how to say that, informative to get the full picture of how supporting educational games are. But the claim, of course, is the whole progression of students is nicely supported by gamified elements or by educational video games. It's more tricky when it comes to subtle themes, even contested themes, like environmental awareness and climate change. Yes, but these games that we are talking about do it, again, without calling themselves educational video games. The educational video games, as I said, have been thriving for a long time. And especially the early studies claim that, especially, but not exclusively, it is the immersion and with that the emotional and motivation factors that are actually providing the additional value in education as compared to more traditional teaching, more traditional ways of trying to create awareness for and reflections about certain themes. You have an often cited publication from Mishra and Foster, which came up with 5 claims why it would be beneficial to use educational games or games in general for learning purposes. And these are the cognitive, the practical, the physiological, and the social skills, and of course motivation, which they are set to support educational games. And you would have this term edutainment, which is very, very often used in especially early publications about educational games. So in short, the claims and the potential pluses of serious and educational games are that they can actively enhance and support, as I said, not only very direct or top-down knowledge gain, but also these more subtle levels of learning experiences by tapping into these dimensions of engagement, motivation, emotions, basically. And of course, the other claim is that by utilizing basically the interactiveness of video games to bring about precisely this immersion and emotion, with that, I think we all can agree on that is that games and of course gaming do not exist only in or as rather close spaces, but they have influences and impact far beyond this activity and far beyond the medium, a game. And in trying to underline this, to stress this, a decade ago, 2014, two colleagues of mine, Kerstin Rade-Antweiler and Michael Waltemate and me, we came up with this artificial term, gamevironments, which is a combination of games gaming and environment. We wanted to stress certain things. We wanted to show a direction for reflection about games and gaming with this by highlighting these environments of games. So basically, the gamevironments concept of 2014 argues to broaden the study of games, gaming, and culture beyond media-centered approaches and to better and also stronger highlight the recipient perspectives. So it's actor-centered research that this promotes. And as I said, this goes beyond looking at the players only. This tries to look at many more levels than the players. We are currently revamping this concept. There will be a special issue in the journal with the same name, Gamevironments, out at the end of the year, which tries to, well, discuss, critically reflect what has been missing, possibly, in this 2014 concept and how we can adapt or use that currently. It's not yet there, the special issue, so let's stick with the 2014 concept for a second, because this is important also for our case studies today. Another thing that Gamevironments stresses is that you have to take both the game content and the performative aspects, that is the ludic interaction, into account. And you have to look at the broader cultural and social contexts in which the games are produced but also consumed. And that, of course, includes regional contexts. That includes also looking beyond the so-called West and trying to find out what, if any, particular characteristics are there in certain world regions. We think that Gamevironments, the environments of games in particular, consist of two levels. That is, of course, it's a technical environment, but also it's a cultural environment. Both are important to get the full picture. The technical environment, you see examples. This is not an exhaustive list. These are examples. The game itself, obviously, you have the textual, but also the audiovisual narratives. You have, of course, the interactivity. You have in-game performances and so on. You have the rule system as a game context. We call that the production, the design. And you have gamer, player generated media content, the gaming performances and experiences, gaming videos and so on. And then you have the cultural environment of gaming, cultural, social, political, religious, and so on surroundings that, of course, influence the constructions and the designs of games and of gaming experiences wherever they happen in the world. So again, these regional and social contexts are very much highlighted with this. This is the last slide before we come to the examples. So what gamevironments tries to do is to combine this analysis of video games within the broader cultural and social context where they are actually happening. I said already, gamevironment argues for studying the cultural and social impact and implications as well of games and gaming as a practice. And yes, the global aspects of games and gaming need to be highlighted because it is important to ascertain whether these gaming processes are the same worldwide or whether there are different criteria for designing, experiencing, of course, valuing, and presenting games and gamer-generated content in these different regional settings. Let's come to the examples. Our first example is a very new game. It's not even 6 months old or about 6 months old. It's called Tea Garden Simulator, produced by Flying Robot Studios in Kolkata, India. And it's a game about tea and how to produce tea and how to grow tea and how this all is related to climate and sustainability issues. I have a very short clip. It's literally a minute to give you an idea.
Step into the captivating world of the Tea Garden Simulator. You embark on a journey of discovery to explore the intricacies of tea production with meticulously recreated real-world research.
Okay, yes, you got an idea, I believe, about how detailed, meticulous parts of the games of this game are. The game is announced by the producers, by the designers on the platform where it's situated as an immersive journey of tea growing and processing based on real-world research. You have the opportunity to recreate thrilling teas that have been concealed for generations. So already here you can find a thing that I'm going to highlight and that I find very interesting, this particular stressing of the basing in real-world research. That is the implication of and the collaboration with researchers on tea growing. The same platform tells us the player also needs to be prepared to face challenges such as pests, weather variations, and irrigation conundrums that can either aid or hinder your venture. So there are several noteworthy details in how this game incorporates these climate change and environmental education. I would call it that. I know that Satyajit Chakraborty, the main developer, is not a fan of that term, educational video games, for several reasons. One of the things that happens in the game is that the player is asked to negotiate several nature environment related factors. There have to be very detailed calculations made in order to progress. You have to take into account certain levels of humidity, for example, certain level of elements in the earth that all in combination lead to, yes, a fail or a pass with this creation. The main developer, Satyajit Chakraborty, whom I just mentioned, for instance, says in an interview, in Tea Garden Simulator, the actual thing was to dig into this world of plants and their balance with nature in the deepest way possible, so that one gets a good tea out of it. Even if one of the factors gets a little bit off, all this beautiful thing gets off. It's like a house of cards. Play with it, and it's very easy to break. So the intention was there already to show this, what the studio often called intricate balance of nature, soil, and human involvement in this, through the tea growing, in this balance. Another part of a quote is that we didn't give any message in a direct way. Do this for climate change or anything like that. I always believe that once you get the player through the experience, you let him find his own conclusions. Here, we didn't preach anything. We just exposed the player to this wonderful balance, this intricate balance. We want them to get acquainted with it. So whenever something bad happens, they understand that this is due to that and has a lot of consequences. This is a second point I would like to stress. This indirect approach, this not top-down, as I said before, approach, this non-preaching approach, how to transmit this climate awareness, hence awareness. There have been collaborations with certain researchers, I mentioned that, who have been invited to take part in the development of the game, and that has been very well received. It has been a very long process to produce this game. And the second point would be that you have this rather explorative, this captivating gameplay that can create a declaredly appreciated, I'm coming to that, why declaredly, to create an appreciated source of learning and exploring. So you center that all in gameplay. Declaredly well received is because I did also look at the reviews. I wanted to know if this is well received, what are people doing with it. The reviews to date are positive to very positive, especially on Steam, where the game is centered. And all these reviews collectively actually praise two features above others. So the first one is that the game has a very detailed, meticulous embedding of the research findings. And the other is that there is an intricate integration of these complexities into the gameplay. This is a quote from a review, which proves what I just said. Basically, it just underlines this. Interestingly, the game uses the insight of experts at the Chengmari tea gardens and other tea estates. This means that every aspect of the tea growing experience has been studied and reflected in the game. And this includes concepts like soil analysis, land preparation, and so on and so on. That is one of the reviewers' voices. And this is another one. There's tea diversity, white, green, oolong, black, and more. So I said, it's a new game. We can't really pin down yet how it's received, how it's going to be received in the future. Yet already at this time, I would say we can summarize 2 points. I think that the game is a very good example for how game developers first use scientific research to produce appealing yet educating games on refined topics, including our climate change. And second, that game developers can successfully use really subtle gamified strategies, arguably especially also for sensitive and complex topics. That is the not preaching that was mentioned by the game developer, but instead allowing players to experience and understand at their own pace. So instead of integrating information or pushing the player's learning curve through these more direct, top-down pedagogical approaches, this kind of embedding allows enhancing awareness, respect, and understanding in arguably also more differentiated ways. That is a final interview quote from the main developer, Satyajit Chakraborty, which sums up nicely his philosophy about game development, which of course touches with what we just said. This is my personal approach to video games. It's a motto of the studio. There's a lot of tangential learning. This is a game where all the parameters from nature need to be balanced, weather and so on. And only if you appreciate this climate change and actually how these things are combined and how delicate the balance is, it is possible to get a good thing out of it. If you don't appreciate the intricacies of it, the complexities of it, the details of it, it is impossible to actually empathize with it. You can understand the impact of it, but actual balance is so much delicate. Let's come to a second example, which is quite different, but also interesting. It's a game which is called Little Witch in the Woods from Korea. It's not even released yet in the full version. There is an early access version in Steam, released in 2022. And already that early access version got a big fandom around it, got a big fan base. There have been a lot of reviews, and it is actually quite interesting for us to see how these the fan sharing of experiences or Okay, you can see at first glance, it's a very different game. In aesthetics, certainly, it's one of those cozy games, which, well, they are produced arguably quite a lot in East Asia. There is, as I said, a large fan base for these kind of games. But this one, in a way, centers around climate and sustainability issues. Also in this game, we can see that the game developers want to specifically include the player's views, expert views, when designing the full version, which is yet to come. We consider it important to understand the experiences players feel while playing games. It can help us provide a better experience for players. We expect to be able to get insights from not developers, but players during early access. That is a quote which accompanied the early access from the game developers themselves. This game integration skills among and across human and non-human agents, that is plants, animals, and in our case also superhumans like witches. The reviews have been very positive, in fact. And despite what I thought when I first saw a trailer of this game, it's not in particular children who are attracted to that. So the fan base indeed are adults. And you can see one review example here from a YouTube gameplay which was commented on. Everything was great besides the fact that it was over too fast. So this is like general praise, which is there a lot. That's not noteworthy in any particular way. But then you can also have comments which are more focused on the environmental issues in the game. So Little Witch in the Woods is a cute, yes, we saw that, exploration, collection, and so on. A few puzzles in the game. Mechanics are sound, characters are likable, adorable art design, game music, and so on. I'm excited to see how this game develops. Again, it's not yet out in the full version. Sorry, the environmental issues just come here. So when looking at the games, especially Steam discussion forum, which I did in this case, it is already proven, in fact, despite the full version still missing, that the game has already succeeded in triggering players, and quite a number of them, to reflect on various aspects of nature, of environment, of what benefits certain plants and animals and what not. For instance, through discussions about the more mythical plants and animals in the game, golden apples, rosemary, waterways, bunnies, birds, spiders. But it's also important in the game, by the way, to interact with the villagers, that is, with the other humans who live at the border of this woods where the little witch lives. And then you would have fan art, fan guides like this. So there are several guides to gameplay posted. This one is called Forest's Unique Creatures, with subsections on the animals and plants that you find in the game, to, quote, help people find recognizing the unique creatures and plants. They can be found and harvested the same way as those of the same species. Only the appearance varies and it's not necessarily obvious, but the unique ones will give you double the loot. So it's, well, an encyclopedia which is provided by the fan base. And a thing that, again, the reviewers stress in this case, as well as in the first case, as in Tea Garden Simulator, is that there is a learning curve, a very particular learning curve on nature, but also other content of the game, of course. For instance, you can see that in this quote, the encyclopedia, in which they have added additional information and challenges, such as the research project that's praised. According to the patch notes, a research project system has been added and benefits can be earned based on achievement. So there is a learning curve inbuilt already in this, which makes me think that Little Witch in the Woods is another example of how games may contribute to enhance this awareness, reflectiveness also, respect for, and empathy about nature and nature environments more broadly, about the delicate interlacing with humans, in our case, again, also non-humans. And it goes for players, but it also goes for a person watching the reviews and gameplay videos, right? It's not only the players themselves. And yet again, we have a very non-direct, non-confrontational approach. That is, we don't have a wagging finger. Let's see what the full version brings. And to conclude, of course, we have to keep in mind that these two are taken beyond the actual gameplay by players, by persons watching their gameplay, by friends, by peers with value formations around nature environments broadly, right? How they translate their gameplay experiences into actual concrete thoughts and actions. To know that, you need to do especially more interviews. But there is some evidence already that this happens. Some other studies start to prove this claim. Because, you see a quote from Algo, games and gaming, of course, present a great opportunity for education on climate change and sustainable development. There is no question. But they also do so in a specific way, as games force us to interact with the system and they produce feelings. So games certainly are firmly established venues to support not create, but at least support the shaping or the negotiating or the empathizing over, and in parts even transcending of conflicts as related to environmental awareness. In the best case scenario, of course. They, of course, create new knowledge, awareness, and so on. And possibly these two examples have at least indicated that some of the video games produced in Asia, which are targeting global audiences, are no exception. But some of them do very consciously try to find new ways of dealing with this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Zeiler, for this interesting talk and introducing us to this interesting project. We would then have questions, comments from the audience. And I know it takes a second to questions formulate, yes.
Also, it's lunch break time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I was wondering, I work a lot with teachers that they are interested in bringing not only games but other art forms to the classroom, especially cinema. And my question to you is like, why do you think that, for instance, when seeing a trailer of any movie, there's no need of insisting on the instructional benefits of it, but still, when we are seeing like a trailer of a game that is not supposed to be an educational game but a commercial game, still there's this need of highlighting all the educational benefits, and because I think that this makes the game advocate for this kind of instructional approaches. And I don't know if it has to do with the
of how gaming could potentially be dangerous. There are, of course, many studies on that. So yeah, I think it's partly that. But also, of course, there is a difference between any other medium, book, film, whatever you take, and a game. And that is what also the early studies about educational games try to stress. It's that interactive element, which is supposed to bring about more immersion, and with that more engagement, and with that more attachment. It's about the embodied experience, basically, the immersion.
Further questions? Or maybe in the online chat? Okay.
Really enjoyed the talk. Thank you. So there's kind of, between these two games, one approach feels more sort of information, logic, engineering, like, and the other is about feelings. And so, do you have a sense which of those two might be more impactful?
I think that is absolutely impossible to say. So yes, totally correct observation. Obviously, one is very, very much focused on logic, on calculation that you have to do, and the other one is cute. So I think they have very different audiences, right? They'll have very different fan bases, but both of them do have fan bases. I would say in general, and again, it could be whatever medium we are talking about. A film, an emotional film, I don't know, a romance reaches very different audiences than whatever documentary or something, in lack of a good example. But yeah, it does reach people. That's the most important thing. I can't answer this question, and I think no one could, right? Yeah.
I was thinking myself, I'm trying to formulate the question. I was thinking in terms of the games that sort of draw the players' attention to these kinds of themes, and we we just recently got a new popular TV show based on this post-apocalyptic wasteland type of game, and obviously those kinds of games also kind of relate to climate change and sort of like the earth becoming this wasteland, and I guess there are certainly they have a longer lineage within games.
Yes.
And I was just thinking about these potential themes for games like, and we saw 2 examples, and I was the question I'm trying to formulate was kind of like, are we so used to or jaded with these wasteland games that they
2 very small productions, right? Both are indie games. And yet, for like, given that fact, they have reached relatively large audiences so far. The AAA games, which play with these wastelands and apocalyptic scenarios a lot, they have a very different fan base. And I mean, yeah, you also have, I don't know how many million people playing shooters and nothing else.
Yeah.
Yes, I would say it's up to every individual to reflect or not, as well as it's up to every individual to choose the game they play, right?
Right. More questions? If not, then let's continue the discussion over at lunch. Let's thank once again Professor Zeiler for this interesting talk.
Thank you for having me.